Let's open this video off with the Spurs running a classic double drag pick and roll for Castle. In this action, the first screener rolls hard to the rim while the second flares out to the three-point line. Now, why run this specific play? Simple. Castle's primary defender is Jimmy Butler, one of the better perimeter defenders in the league. But look closely at the Spurs' lineup on this possession. There's not a single traditional big on the floor. That gives Draymond the freedom to guard a wing or guard instead of being tethered to a big in the paint. And here, he's matched up with Keldon Johnson. Why Keldon? Because outside of Castle, Keldon is the least threatening shooter on the floor, knocking down just 31.8% of his threes. So, what does that mean? If Keldon isn't involved in the action, Draymond can sag way off him and wreak havoc as a helper, clogging the lane, tagging rollers, and protecting the rim. But by pulling Draymond into the action, the Spurs neutralize the Warriors' best help defender. With Green occupied, the responsibility of rim protection now falls to Pods and Steph, far from ideal. And that's not all. With Golden State switching everything with this smaller lineup, the Spurs' real goal is to engineer a one-on-one matchup between Castle and Hield by the end of the action. And they get it. But the brilliance of this play goes beyond just targeting Hield. As I mentioned earlier, the first screener, Keldon, rolls hard to the rim, dragging Butler with him. Meanwhile, the second screener, Sham Penny, pops out to the three-point line, pulling Draymond away from the paint. Now, with the Warriors' best rim protector stuck on the perimeter, guarding a 37.1% three-point shooter, Draymond is forced into a dilemma. Help off Sham Penny and risk giving up a clean look from deep, or stay home and leave the paint unprotected? That indecision is exactly what opens the door for Castle. With Hield guarding him at the point of attack and Curry glued to Chris Paul, a 37.7% shooter from deep, on the strong side, Castle is left with a green light. He breaks Hield down with a few quick dribble moves, gets downhill, and finishes at the rim. Simple action, just a standard double drag. But the brilliance lies in the details, the spacing, the screeners, and the matchup manipulation. It all adds up to a wide-open bucket. And this isn't just a one-time play. They trust Castle with this same double drag setup late in games too. In another game, Golden State decides to avoid switching to keep Looney from being stranded on an island against Castle. Instead, Butler goes under the screen, daring Castle to pull up. On paper, it's a smart gamble. Castle hit just 25.2% of his pull-up threes this season. But this time, he buries it. But what really stands out about this play isn't just that Castle made the shot. It's the confidence it took to even attempt it, something we will bring up again near the end of this video. As a rookie, and one who hasn't exactly been lighting it up from deep this season, that kind of self-belief speaks volumes. Confidence is the foundation of any developing shooter, and it's why I firmly believe that if Castle puts in the work this offseason, we could see a major leap in his perimeter game next year. Now here's the interesting part. Why are the Spurs even running these kinds of actions for him? Whether it's a double drag screen or a standard pick and roll, it's all designed to play to Castle's strength, his driving ability. Over a third of his total points this season came from drives. That's his bread and butter. But here's where it gets a little tricky. While I mentioned that Castle's driving game is his strength, it is also ironically his weakness. Sounds confusing, right? Let me explain. There are two key components to any successful drive: getting to the rim and finishing at the rim. Castle is excellent at the first part. He gets downhill, breaks through defenses, creates chaos. But the second part, that's where the trouble begins. He just hasn't been converting those looks at a high rate. Among all Spurs players who've attempted at least 20 shots on drives this season, Castle ranks second to last, converting just 43.1% of those attempts, with Sham Penny being the only player below him. That puts Castle not just near the bottom of his own team, but among the league's least efficient high-volume drivers. Even when you narrow it down to just finishing in the paint, Castle still ranks in the bottom 4 on the Spurs. Simply put, his shot-making on drives has been a real weakness. But here's where things get interesting. Despite the poor finishing numbers, Castle's driving game still finds success, just in a different way. Among all players this season with at least 100 ISO possessions, no one has drawn fouls at a higher rate than Castle. Let that sink in. Castle drew fouls on a staggering 20.7% of his ISO possessions. That's a higher rate than Harden, Ja, Luka, Shea, and Brunson, all of them known for their elite foul drawing ability. Now, some fans might argue that drawing fouls isn't pure basketball and that it's a way of gaming the system. But in Castle's case, it speaks to something real: his speed. Defenders just can't stay in front of him when he decides to put his head down and drive. They're forced to reach in, bump, or hack because they're simply outmatched, and that's the key dynamic here. Castle usually doesn't get the opponent's top defender, sometimes not even the second best, because teams naturally focus on higher offensive threats like Fox, Vassell, or Wemby. As a result, Castle often draws weaker matchups. These defenders might sag off him, daring him to shoot from deep since he isn't a major threat from three, and try to use that cushion to contain his drives. But what these defenders gain in spacing, they lose in discipline and footwork. And when Castle explodes downhill, that lack of control becomes costly. They can't stay in front of him, and more often than not, they're left with no choice but to foul. Here the Spurs are pushing in transition. Castle receives the pass, but instead of forcing a drive on Franz, he smartly pulls it back. Why? Because he sees Paolo already lurking near the rim in help position. So, Castle resets the possession and now finds himself in an ISO matchup against Franz. Statistically, among the players currently on the court, Franz is the Magic's weakest ISO defender, giving up 1.01 points per possession in those situations. Castle knows that help defense is unlikely to come from the strong side corner where Corey Joseph is parked. Joseph isn't about to leave Vassell wide open in the corner, a 43.4% three-point shooter from that exact spot. So, Castle makes his move and attacks the strong side, knowing the Magic can't afford to rotate over. Watch how quickly he goes at Franz. The sudden burst catches Franz off guard and he instinctively reaches in to try and slow Castle down. That's all the invitation Castle needs. He feels the contact, goes straight up through it, and earns the and one. Fast forward to a similar situation. This time, Castle is matched up against Sam Merrill. He notices Sochan drifting toward the strong side corner and signals him to clear out, trying to create a one-on-one scenario with Merrill. If Sochan were to be parked in the strong side corner, Javonte Green would most likely sag off him and offer help on Castle's drive, since Sochan isn't much of a three-point threat. With the side cleared, Castle attacks Merrill on the drive, and just like before, the defender reaches in to stop the penetration. Castle absorbs the contact, elevates through it, and once again gets the bucket plus the foul. In the first clip, Castle wisely pulls back instead of forcing the transition, recognizing in real time that it wasn't the right play for that moment. Then, on the next clip, he shows another layer of maturity. Unlike the previous play, this time he signals for Sochan to clear the strong side, fully aware of his three-point limitations. That kind of awareness and decision-making is incredibly underrated and rarely gets the appreciation it deserves. But the most impressive part is that it is all coming from a rookie who's still just scratching the surface of his potential. That's why, even though Castle still has room to grow offensively, it's his feel for the game and elite basketball IQ, two of the hardest things for young players to master, that make him so trustworthy moving forward. That's what gives you real confidence that Castle can eventually grow into a reliable offensive option. And when you pair that with how phenomenal he's already been on defense this season, it's easy to imagine him becoming one of the best two-way players in the league. I actually broke down his defense in detail in a previous video, so if you haven't seen that yet, go ahead and click the link in the top right corner. But for now, it's clear Castle has the tools to become a great player in this league. It's going to be exciting to watch how his off-season work translates into real games next year. But until then, as always, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate all the love and support, and I can't wait to break down more film with you next time.
Castle by one defender by two. Oh!